Over the last couple of years, I've noticed quite the influx in a particular subgenre of monster taming game that has almost become even more widespread than the typical turn-based story-driven RPG routes that the genre is more so known for and that most people tend to gravitate towards monster taming games for. We see time and time again games like Pokemon, the Digimon story games, Monster Hunter Stories, Shin Megami Tensei, Yokai Watch, Nexomon, Coromon, Cassette Beasts, and so many other games in the same sort of vein act as the sort of bread and butter for what monster taming is. That being said, the monster taming genre is a robust sort of subcategory of game and can be attached to a wide variety of different experiences, including dungeon crawlers, tactical RPG, turn-based games, of course, farming games, and a whole lot of others, but in particular, the subject of today's video, roguelike and roguelite titles. Now, before I continue, let me just say I absolutely love the amount of innovation that the genre has brought forth over the years, and breaking free from the traditional turn-based RPG trope is always welcome, and this video is not to stifle innovation, nor is it to go after a particular type of game, because it's not something that I'm particularly a huge fan of myself. This is more so to talk about broader trends and what I've been seeing from you guys, the community. So before you comment accusing me of these things, just know that I know you didn't watch this video. Now, firstly, what's a roguelike? Well, to be very short and brief, roguelike titles are generally games where the world and environment are randomized and the player will partake in various runs, each of which is essentially different, and depending on whether or not the game is a roguelike or a roguelite, you'll usually lose your progress up to a certain point upon losing one of these runs, and generally there will be some type of progression between the runs themselves. Sometimes these roguelike worlds are expressed by a sort of branching set of paths with various decisions that you can make. Other times they'll be expressed in a more dungeon crawling environment where you have an overworld, and that overworld consists of like different biomes and stuff, and the map's randomly generated. But this is a pretty gross simplification of things. This is just the general way things go. Some of them will feature permadeath for your monsters, others will let you bring forth already captured monsters in other runs, but the core gameplay loop is something to the effect of traverse the randomly generated area until you get to the boss at the end, and essentially rinse and repeat. This allows for what a lot of developers call an infinite gameplay loop, since every run is technically different, and some games do this in a really creative way. All that being said, I've been getting a lot of comments, and I've noticed this myself, that there has been a massive uptick in the amount of monster taming roguelike games, and this seems to be sort of a bit of a sore spot when it comes to new games getting revealed or announced. I'll get countless comments from you guys basically saying something to the effect of, I was interested in this game until I found out it was a roguelike. Now, I can understand this sentiment because a lot of people think of monster taming as sort of a grand immersive adventure where part of the experience is building up a team and taking that team throughout a lived-in world and having to replay the same run over and over again, even if it's randomized, coupled with some of these games and most of them having some type of permadeath mechanic. It can take a lot of players out of it. Again, this isn't to dog on roguelike games, this is just an inference based on what I've seen with the monster taming market in particular and how it can be contrasted by the sort of core mechanics present within roguelike games. Furthermore, and this is just me, you can definitely let me know in the comments if you disagree, but I typically am hard-pressed to find a lot of really groundbreaking, unique monster taming roguelike games that have something interesting to make a name for themselves outside of just being another turn-based roguelike with generic branching paths. I say that with a massive but, however, because there are plenty of monster taming roguelike games that I feel deserve a lot more attention because they do just that. Aethermancer brings some of the best pixel art and mixes that with a beautiful randomly generated world to explore and unique combat system. All of this led to a very successful launch on Steam. Coromon Rogue Planet is a spin-off of an already established IP, adding new battle mechanics, new Coromon and characters, as well as expanding on the initial game's story. Abomination Monster Rifts brings forth the most crossover content we've ever seen before in a monster taming game, a monster creator feature, and the first one was pretty good as well. Patch Quest completely mixes things up by being a monster mounting bullet hell, and it's honestly extremely underrated, and there are definitely more instances of games like this. That being said, there's been such a massive influx in these types of games, and based on what some of these developers have told me, general interest in these games from the community, and what I've seen, there seems to unfortunately be a lot less interest in these games in general, which kind of sucks, but I can see why. I've spoken to a ton of devs about why they've decided to make roguelike games behind the scenes, and there are usually two main answers to this, both of which are usually used in tandem. The first being that roguelikes in general require less resources to make, since you don't have to map out an entire world and in-depth story, and the other reason is that there are a few indie roguelike games outside of the genre that have really blown up, and devs are trying to sort of jump on that trend and replicate that. Now, let me make this clear, I'm not accusing accusing every developer of doing this. However, there are a decent amount of people that are, and I feel like games that are roguelikes because of specific passion towards those types of games end up really standing out, like Patch Quest as mentioned, while games that are made solely to keep the resource load down end up usually not feeling quite the same. Now keep in mind, guys, that a lot of what I'm saying here could also be said about turn-based monster taming games as well. There are some that basically just try to do their own version of Pokemon, and there are those that innovate to the point where calling them Pokemon-like is a massive falsehood. I think the difference is just in the monster taming demographic. Most monster taming fans are those that are either current or past Pokemon fans, while roguelike games are a lot more niche in general. So should monster taming devs stop making roguelikes? No, I don't think that at all. I don't want that to be the message of this video. I more so want the takeaway to be that developers should realize that when it comes to making a roguelike game, they are sort of facing an uphill battle since they will by nature be more niche than their turn-based counterparts. So if this is something you're planning on doing, make sure that you are creating such a game because you are passionate about roguelikes in particular, rather than just using it as a way to save resources or because you think that's what's trending. Also, make sure you add something to the game to make it stand out from the rest of the roguelike crowd. Again, I've spoken to a lot of roguelike developers who have been quite underwhelmed or disappointed with the amount of attentions their games got, especially in terms of sales, so that's sort of my PSA. I don't want to mention any names for privacy's sake, and none of the footage you're seeing on screen necessarily correlates to those specific developers, so keep that in mind too. So yeah, guys, that's my long-winded spiel. I think that the amount of my comments concerning roguelike titles that are negative because the games are roguelike or lacking interest in these types of games in general is disappointing, but I do understand where that sentiment is coming from, especially since I'm not a big roguelike guy myself. There are games that definitely break the mold, and we've seen with titles like Aethermancer that actually outsold Monster Sanctuary by the looks of it, at least on Steam, that there is a place for high-quality, innovative roguelike monster tamers, but they shouldn't be treated like a shortcut or an easy way to make a game, but instead with just as much enthusiasm and passion as any other. What do you guys think? Do you guys think there are too many roguelike monster taming games? Do you think that there aren't too many, but maybe not enough that innovate? Do you think I'm wrong? Definitely let me know down below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all things monster taming. You could also check out my Twitter, Patreon, channel memberships, all that fun stuff. And special thanks to our supporters, especially Candy Morency, TragSoft, Valorware, Nemo, and Wrathful Beast, and we'll see you next time. Peace.